All right, so I know you were all excited for what's next, and trust me, it is going to be worth it. Up next, we are thrilled to welcome Mamuna Oladipo, Vice President of Product at Shopify. At Shopify, Mamuna leads with intention, building high-performing product teams and designing processes that help complex, matrixed organizations stay aligned and move strategically. She is all about turning big ideas into real, actionable outcomes, always grounded in data and always grounded in insight. Today, she is here to share her wisdom on micromanagement, a topic that every leader wrestles with. In her talk, Intervene with Precision, zooming in as a leader without micromanaging. If anyone knows how to strike that balance, it is Mamuna. Let's give a warm welcome to Mamuna Oladipo.
Good morning, everybody. Wow, it feels great. Such kind words, thank you. So my name is Mamuna Oladipo. I am here to talk about product leadership skill that separates good operators from great ones. This is when to know how to engage deeply with your teams without taking control. So strategic depth is often confused with micromanagement, and what I found is that your goal here is not to focus on controlling the outcomes, more so focus on protecting quality. So let's take a moment to talk about how we do that without eroding trust, momentum, or autonomy. So quick show of hands, audience participation would be loved. How many of you have been called out for being too in the weeds? No, some folks, okay, this makes me feel okay. I personally have been called this once or twice. Sometimes it's a fair flag. Other times I find that it's an opportunity to dive deeper into the details, pay closer attention. Now, more audience participation. Think back to a time when you perhaps wanted to ask a deeper question, but paused or hesitated because you felt that potentially asking the question would be overstepping or would be perceived as you being too far in the weeds. Anybody? Okay, thank you. Keep that moment in mind. My belief is that hesitation, when it becomes habit, can become costly. So, I think as leaders, it's easy to celebrate scale, delegation, staying out of the weeds, right? But in my experience, I've found that product issues don't normally come up in dashboards. They don't normally show up in metrics. They oftentimes show themselves in edge cases, user trust signals, and those poor assumptions. So strategic depth is how we surface that risk before it becomes regrettable. This is not about micromanagement. It's about protecting quality, clarity, user trust, and that long-term integrity of your product. So excuse I don't design all the time, but I want to share a real-life experience for you when strategic depth did make the difference for me, without micromanaging and without making the team feel like I was swooping in, taking over the project. So a little while back, I was seeing a pattern. My teams, they were kicking off projects, things were going well, everything was fine. But as they worked towards the end of the project, things were ending in escalation and they were coming to me for help. So what I could have done was I could have dove into every single project individually, but that's not scalable. What I decided to do was what I encourage others to do, get curious. So I started attending team retros. And in those retros, I joined as a listener, not a critic. And what I started to notice was a pattern. And in this pattern, it wasn't about poor execution. Really, it was about missed requirements. Those critical details weren't being challenged early enough in the conversation. And so that habit hadn't taken root yet for the teams of those asking those second layer questions. Now, I could have then said, okay, team, great, good luck, keep going. But I decided to take it a step deeper. I didn't call people out. I didn't put a fire drill or anything like that. I pulled my direct reports together and pulled them into a room and asked 2 questions. Across these projects, what are some similarities you're noticing? And where do we think these breakdowns are happening? They figured it out, great, perfect. Again, I could have stepped away and said, great, now go do it, but I believe in modeling and setting a clear expectation for the team. So what I did was I rolled up my sleeves and sat next to the team. I worked alongside them to tease apart the requirements and clarify assumptions. And by creating this space where the teams could slow down, reframe, and then speed up again on their own terms, I found that the teams had a good level of ownership. They understood the expectations for what I wanted to see of them. So to me, depth looks like not quite hovering, right? But it's being close enough to spot the risk, but skilled enough to step away when it's time to step away. So you have to know when to cut yourself off. This one to me is important, right? Because strategic depth and micromanagement are not the same things. So a lot of teams do get confused here, and I think a lot of time leaders oftentimes doubt themselves. So micromanagement shows itself up as control. It's rewriting specs, it's overriding decisions, and it's draining autonomy. Whereas strategic depth, this shows up as context. So here, you are asking the team, what's shaping this? What's missing here? And you're leaving space for them to take the lead. And hot take, I don't think that micromanagement is always the villain, right? There are moments in those high-risk, high-impact pieces of work where it's not just appropriate, but almost a necessity for you to dive deeper than usual. What matters is how you do it and why. So the distinction I generally use here is I ask myself, am I helping the team think more clearly, or am I just trying to be right? And I'm pretty sure everyone would say at some point they've been guilty of just trying to be right. And so it's important that we do reflect as leaders ourselves to make sure that we're not doing that. And then I ask myself, am I making my team sharper or feel smaller? When you engage with the intent to elevate rather than override, your presence will build trust. I believe depth normalizes working in the details, not because you don't trust your team, but because you care enough to trust the work that they're doing. So I believe strategic depth lives and dies in the language that you use. So it's not just what you ask, but how you ask it, right? A lot of times people dismiss their words as semantics, but it does really touch on psychological safety. So the way you may phrase a question can either invite collaboration or trigger defensiveness. These small shifts in how you change your words can change how the feedback is landing with your team. So it moves you from interrogating to exploring, challenging the person to challenging the problem, which is important. So instead of saying something like, this doesn't make sense, you can say, hey, can you walk me through this from the user perspective? Or instead of saying, we need to fix this, you can say, what trade-offs have you considered when you made this choice, right? It starts with tone, not just words. You know, a lot of times, my coach always say, personalize it. So sometimes I ask myself, how do I make it such that my team is confident and comfortable with their leaders sitting next to them and doing the work? And we've all heard people say, hey, my manager doesn't know what I do. They don't know how to support me. Or the opposite, where a person may say, my manager sits next to me and it causes me to second guess my work and I'm not sure I want them sitting next to me, right? I believe strategic depth strikes that quality of balance between the two. When done well, your proximity will communicate that you're here because it matters and that you trust the person enough that's building it, but you care deeply to engage with what they're building. The goal is not for you to take over. The goal is to make your team sharper, more confident, and feel more seen. So, when I think you're thinking about strategic depth, your goal here is, again, not to dive into everything. It's when you know that your attention there will create leverage. So there are 3 signals that I generally look for that tell me that it's important for me to dive deeper into a project. The first is ambiguity. So here, the goal is fuzzy, functions are defining goals or success very differently. Nip that in the bud as quickly as possible, right? Because you can't solve 3 or 4 different problems and land in the same place. Same thing with misalignment. Oftentimes you may see product design, engineering, other teams solving different types of problems. If you're all solving different problems, you're going to end up in different places, and that's not unexpected. You should probably address that as well. Thirdly, compounding consequences. And this is the one that at Shopify we pay a lot of attention to. It's today's shortcuts becoming tomorrow's UX debt, data sprawl, customer trust issues. It's important to understand that when you're building a product, you're building it for a long term, and teaching your team to understand that as well. A lot of times you have a lot of projects going on, you have your teams running different places, and you need a system to track what's going on. And so for myself, I have a couple of systems. One is a weekly radar. It's very basic. Stoplights, red, yellow, green. Week over week, I track the trends of how the project is progressing. If I'm finding a project has been red or yellow for 2 weeks or more, I'm doing a product review. And it's not me going in as a critic, it's me going in as a listener. I'm creating a space for the team to engage in dialogue around me. Then I have a weekly digest with my leads. This is 1 to 2 sentences max. I am not focused on status here. I want to understand what's on your mind for this week. A lot of times people may surface up, oh, I'm concerned about a conversation I have to have next week with this person, or I wish I would have prioritized this thing over that thing, whatever it is. You want to encourage these things to be pulled into your digest. And then one-on-one prompts that we'll dive a bit deeper into later. But these cues help me decide not just what's urgent, but where I can add value without disrupting momentum. So I believe strongly that if a skill only lives in your head, it's not sustainable, and it's certainly not scalable. At Shopify, strategic depth isn't just tolerated, it's expected. All leaders at every level are expected to dive into the details. It's normal to ask direct questions. You say the thing, and then you keep moving. The assumption here is that everyone is coming with good intent. It makes it easier to receive and share feedback with that mindfulness. But I acknowledge not every culture is like that. I definitely worked in organizations where you have to provide more caveats potentially, or you have to sort of buffer your words. And so the norms and how you can shape whatever it is that you're trying to build depends on you here. And so if you're leading and shaping the team, what I would encourage you to focus on is normalizing inquiry. So curiosity is not a challenge to authority, it's a signal of care. 2, I would ritualize reflection. This is thinking out loud, and sometimes it's a skill that hasn't been fully developed, but it's making it very standard to ask the question, what did we almost miss, not just what went well? And thirdly, celebrating discernment. So these are really about thinking about your rewards here. So, you're not just rewarding velocity, but you're looking at pattern recognition. So if someone catches something before it becomes a fire, call that out, right? I think the most important thing we can do is model the behaviors we want people to see. And so strategic depth, it can very much be taught, but it has to be taught with an environment that's safe, and it has to be seen as valuable from the top. One-on-one coaching is one of my most powerful tools that I use to apply my depth. A lot of times people rely on dashboards, and I use dashboards and metrics, but when I think about shipping quickly, my one-on-ones are one of those tools. And it's because I don't use my one-on-ones as a status check. My goal here is to really think about how someone thinks, right? So one-on-ones, sometimes people say, yeah, I know the people that work for me, but do you truly know them? Do you know what motivates them? Do you know what encourages them? Do you know how they like to receive information? Those types of things help you to understand how a person breaks down a problem, how they respond to risk, how they communicate, right? You are helping to shape their judgment. And so it's important that you use your one-on-ones meaningfully. So in my one-on-ones, I'm signal surfacing, so I'm asking questions like, what's quietly worrying you? And a lot of times what you may catch in this is that the loud problems will start to surface. They haven't become noise yet, but they'll say, actually, while we have a moment, like, let's talk about this thing. We were meant to prioritize this, but I decided maybe it wouldn't matter. That could matter. Let's talk about it, right? Pattern recognition. So you ask, what are we moving fast on, but maybe have thought shallowly on? This question helps us spot risk early on, before it gets baked into delivery. And it's important that as you're correcting, you're coaching. So you're not just saying, oh, that's wrong. It's like, okay, look, well, talk me through how you approach that. What do you think you should do here? And kind of guide them to the direction that you want them to move in. The last one is assumption checking. I listen very closely for those untested assumptions, and then I mirror it back. Is this what I heard? And oftentimes people will pause and they'll say, interesting, I actually haven't thought of it in that way. Like, let's talk through that more. Again, it's about creating space. Talking about creating space, your goal as a manager, again, is not to overtake. So if a person is in a stretch moment, give them that space. You can use your one-on-one as coaching from the sidelines, right? You don't want to always jump in. You want the team at the end to be able to do things without you. So I can't catch everything. That's not scalable. Your goal is to build a team that can see the work clearly without you being in the room. They know what questions you're going to ask, and so they'll ask it without you being there. So, some homework for you this week. 3 things. 1, I want you to try identifying one project and ask a second layer question. Not what's next, but maybe what's unclear, and see what you get from the room. Then, in your next one-on-one, I want you to ask the question, what's quietly worrying you? Again, this has surfaced some interesting insights for me as a leader, so I'm very curious to see how it works for you. And then 3rd, I want you to scan your roadmap. I want you to ask, where are we making decisions today that are fast, but might harden into debt tomorrow? None of these things require a reorg or a framework, just a shift in presence, and it moves you from observer to multiplier. It's all about timing, clarity, and intent. So, strategic depth is a multiplier. It protects the product, it matures the team, and it builds trust. Thank you for being here and for the work you do to lead with care, conviction, and clarity. Let's keep building teams in cultures that don't avoid scrutiny, but are strengthened by it. I love to stay connected. I'm terrible at my LinkedIn, but I promise I'll get better. Reach out, share what resonated, and tell me how you're applying this to your org. I'm always learning. Thank you.